The problem is deeply rooted. Obviously, one problem would start with, why are people using substances? I think what happened with the opioid overprescribing, it contributed to a lot of new people becoming addicted. The myth was that OxyContin was not addictive, and they were spending $100 million per year on a marketing campaign to talk about the benefits of this long-acting, non-addictive medication, which turned out to be false. So that false narrative, doctors were taught, pharmacists were taught, the system became built around no pain. And that led to a lot of innocent people becoming addicted, doing what the doctor suggested they do to feel better. You want to have less pain, take this medication. It's good for you. It's not addictive. And by the mid to early 2005, 6, many of us in risk management and safety were aware of workers or family members who were struggling with the early signs of persistent opioid use, even addiction. We recognized whoa, there's a problem. The stigma around this issue, Kevin, is so huge. It was easier, honestly, to talk about suicide prevention before we could talk about mental illness. It took the pandemic before we could talk and write articles about substance misuse. So it made it hard for people to seek help. And once they were addicted, they were in the throngs of a broken system without adequate help and without a proper support network. It was kind of a perfect storm in many ways. It led to a lot of human destruction, not just loss of life, but loss of livelihood, broken families, destroyed people.
Do you think the pandemic has made this worse, or is it in some ways better that, it's opened up the discussion about mental health, or is it a net negative still?
Yeah, we always look for reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah.
You could say there's a silver lining, but the reality is the pandemic worsened or exacerbated this situation. You look at that rate, both in the US and Canada, overdoses before the pandemic and after, almost doubled. In the United States, the first year of the pandemic, there was a 30% increase, followed by a 15% compounded increase. In Canada, before 2019, it was 10 overdoses a day. After the pandemic, it was 20 deaths per day, with a peak of 21 immediately post-pandemic. So in both countries that we're talking primarily about, you could see that being a real problem. The pandemic cut off people access to clinics, access to medication-assisted treatments. It cut off access to their recovery meetings. It introduced new drugs into the system. It disrupted the existing relationships people had. Maybe they had a source of medication that they were getting from a person with prescription. It moved more people to the street to find illicit drugs. And then that drug supply became contaminated. Fentanyl became increasingly more potent. It was being pressed into counterfeit pills to look like, medications that people were seemingly innocently purchasing, whether it looked like Percocet or a Xanax or another medication. It's so lethal that one dose can kill. And frequently, Kevin, I talk about fentanyl as fentakill, just to get people's attention. You have to have these conversations with your children and your loved ones. One dose can kill.
Right. Yeah, and very, very difficult to get off of it after having that one dose. Yes. Right?
But I do think what you said about the silver, I called it a silver lining. The pandemic has allowed us to have this conversation. It forced the hand. It took people who were reluctant or unwilling to have these hard conversations to recognize if not now, it might be too late. And it has forced action. And so in that regard, I think we'll look back and say it was a turning point, if not a tipping point, to say enough is enough. We have to get this under control.